first, what is a co-founder? Because the definition can kind of get diluted, Will. And where do startups get this wrong? I haven't had as many co-founders as you, but I would definitely say I've had probably the worst experiences ever with co-founders. And I think we need to get back to the definition of co-founders. How about we start there?
Okay. Let's get into it. So Ed, I'm curious. Now you piqued my curiosity. When you had these issues with co-founders, how often were you the problem?
Every time. I'm the common denominator. If I had to be totally transparent, it's kind of like people who complain about being in a string of bad relationships. Well, the common factor is you. Now, it's not to say I'm the only deciding factor, but I've learned a lot about how to even define co-founders and how I occur with co-founders. And so I take responsibility for my part, Will.
Yep. And not to suggest you didn't, but when you look at why things blow up or why things didn't work, most people, as you know, Ed, will just blame the other person, whether it's a co-founder, or it's a spouse, whatever. Like that, the marriage didn't work because of them, or my business didn't work because of them. And I'm always interested to hear, well, what part of it didn't work because of you, right?
Yeah.
And where were you the broken cog?
Well, this is the reason I think this question is so important to start off with, because I think, Will, one of the first fundamental mistakes that I made is I confused co-founder with kind of like a partner, different degrees of partner, and employee. That was a difference. So it was like my expectations, their expectations. So they would come in thinking, well, I'm just an employee. And I'm like, no, I want you to act like a co-founder. And that's why things got muddy, Will.
I think so. Okay, so at some point, did you feel like they were overreaching?
No, actually, I probably did the most reaching when it came to that. I think that, and you touched upon it, they didn't work as hard as me, but I had different expectations. And I would say that because of the differences, the disparity of where we are coming from, I didn't spend the time establishing those definitions and what those expectations are. What is reaching? Like, how much reaching are we expecting?
Yeah. It's interesting. So when we talk about the spectrum between what should be a co-founder and what should essentially be an employee, a contractor, other definition, I always look at it, Ed, as, okay, is this person a co-founder because they just happened to be the first person that was willing to work here? Because that's the equivalent of saying, this is my wife because she's the first girl I ever met, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really, right? And I think it gets muddy because when I talk to founders and I ask them, I say, hey, they're saying, I'm looking to bring out a co-founder. I'm like, cool. How many other co-founders did you interview? The answer is almost always none. Right? Almost every time the co-founder becomes code for the first person that was willing to work on my idea. Now, think of how much bias there is, Ed, in that being the first person you brought on, okay? Meaning they didn't have something else to work on. You didn't give them any vetting whatsoever. You kind of knew them, but you never worked with them, things like that. Like, the first person you should bring on should be a contractor. Like, the most arm's length relationship ever, because you will never be in a more vulnerable position to seek help than when you're founding the company.
I think founders could serve themselves much better by just learning how to work with someone else by bringing on that contractor.
And I think a lot of people will say, well, we were coworkers, so I think we'll be good co-founders. That's like saying we were classmates, so we'll be good husband and wife, right? Not even remotely close, okay? As you know, Ed, the co-founder relationship goes so much deeper. It has consequence to it that a coworker relationship doesn't have. Example, Ed, you and I, let's say, are working together, right? At whatever company, and things don't go well. You can quit, I can quit, and the consequence to each other is kind of zero. Now we both go 50-50 on a company. We're sharing the cap table, we're sharing the bank account, we're sharing employee responsibilities, and one of us just quits. The whole thing is messed up, right? The consequence is way different. They're not even remotely comparable.
And Will, how many times have we heard founders say, a co-founder left me high and dry? And now, they're holding my cap table hostage, or investors are mad. We don't know what we're going to do. They left with half the intellectual property, or the technical person left. It happens.
Listen, and so here's what I would say to kind of get back to the question, Ed. With a co-founder, I think a co-founder should be like the 15th date. A co-founder should not be, let's get married on the first date. A co-founder should be someone who we've spent a lot of time, months, maybe a year, on this project together, in a consulting relationship, an advisor relationship, and maybe an employee relationship. And now that I've had lots of cycles with them on this particular company, I'm willing to give it more. And you know what the other side of that, Ed, is? Giving them an opportunity to see what the hell they're getting into.
Yeah. You want to allow them to weigh in before they buy in. And a lot of times your
Yeah.
expectations are wonky that way. But here's how I learned how to get it straight in my mind, Will. I learned that there's a difference between a co-founder, let's say, and that's defined by someone who shares the level of responsibility and emotional investment, especially commensurate
Yeah.
to, like if it's 50-50, they need to be feeling that, you need to be feeling that. And maybe you don't do the same work. You kind of don't want to be doing the same work, but that's that level. They are right there, emotionally invested in the cap table as much as they might be financially or
Yep.
equity. Then there is a co-founding team. I heard this term, Will, co-founding team. And these are the first people that you bring on after you've kind of launched the product. Maybe you got some investment and you want them to have that level of investment, but they're not the same as the co-founder. Like you have that same level of ownership. And then there are employees. And then there are contractors. And what you're advocating for, Will, is to go, hey, how about you start with a contractor? Because, Will, let's just face it. We see this all the time. So many founders just need the contractor. They don't need a co-founder. They just need someone to come.
Insane.
Even if you have them work for free, that's fine. But start them off as a contractor. So it's kind of going backwards. We start at co-founder, but really go contractor, employee, maybe founding team, and then maybe co-founder. That might be the better way.
And here's why. Because statistically, it's not going to work, right? Statistically, you're going to burn through your co-founder and it's going to break. So if you knew that, and the problem is people don't know this, if you knew that going in, Ed, guys like us who have done this many, many, many times over a very long period of time and have seen countless other people do this, we're fortunate enough that we have the experience that we understand why you don't get married on the first date. But most folks going into this simply don't have that experience, so they don't understand what those consequences really are. So they get excited and they jump in and they regret it.
But I'm curious your opinion on this, Will. We know that there are co-founder relationships where the two people aren't even deciding to work on a startup. They're just really good friends. They keep talking. Maybe one is technical, one's not, and they just mash it together and they built a relationship outside of the startup and they decide, hey, let's actually work on a problem together. They spend long nights at, the coffee shop, mashing it through, and they build something together. That is one way that we've seen co-founders come together. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I like it if you've got reps together, right? If you've got time together in the seat and you've worked together on things. But I think you don't really know who your co-founder is. And I keep using the analogy to a spouse until shit goes wrong. That's when you find out who your co-founder is.
Yes.
Okay. When things are going great, you don't have to address problems. Okay. It's when everything goes wrong and you're both hung out to dry. You missed a funding round, you missed payroll, you missed whatever. That's when you realize the quality of that individual, the quality of their commitment, and the quality of your relationship.
Great advice.